Well, we're joined now by Kurt Nachman with Ian Lawyers. Kurt, the former governor is saying that this is a dangerously divided time. I don't know if a lot of people would agree that America is ever in sync with any issue at any time in our history. People always feel one way or another about things. Where does that leave us with this verdict that we know has been rendered, but we don't know what the verdict is in the Donald Trump case?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the important takeaways is always that the rule of law needs to prevail. Our country is a country of laws. It was founded, and it has always continuously and repeatedly been respected in one form or another by leaders who have sort of acquiesced to the rule of law. You go back to Nixon and sort of the Watergate scandal and him stepping down. He ultimately realized that he had to respect the rule of law or be faced being impeached. And then Gerald Ford obviously sacrificed his presidency by issuing a pardon for Nixon to help the country heal and move on. And, you know, so it's certainly something that I would hope is a takeaway from this. But I agree. I think the country is a lot closer than we think it is. It's just there are some significant divisions on some very divisive issues. And, you know, hopefully whatever this result is, the country will be able to sort of look forward as opposed to looking backward.
Kurt, this case turned into sort of a complex case for the jurors in particular. What do you think it says that the verdict is being returned, I would say, pretty quickly in all of this?
Yeah, I think, you know, the sort of rule is, you know, 1 day for every day of testimony is not extraordinary for a jury trial. And so to have a jury come back, they've been deliberating for just a few days at this juncture. But ultimately, it's going to come down to who they believed and, you know, what information they believed. And did they believe Michael Cohen? Really? I mean, that's really what this case comes down to in terms of his testimony. And, you know, a judge always instructs you can believe some, all, or none of what a witness says. And ultimately, the jury pretty clearly is going to make that determination here shortly.
Right. Kurt, I believe we are learning what the verdict is now. We're again finding, I think which one is that, Bernie? He is, go ahead and tell us. Guilty of 34 counts. Guilty of 34 counts of falsifying business records in this hush money scheme. Kurt, you can probably see some of that too, because I know you're in your office.
Yeah, I'm looking off screen as well.
Okay. Yeah, what does that say to you? How would you frame this up in terms of the significance of it and the jury's verdict here?
Well, if I were sitting there and I were his lawyers, I'd be talking about an appeal bond. You know, certainly at this juncture, the judge has significant discretion, whether it's in Maryland or New York, to revoke his recognizance and place him into custody. And so his lawyers better be thinking about, you know, ankle monitor. I understand the Secret Service was already preparing the New York City jail system for potentially having a president incarcerated. And so, you know, if I were his lawyers, I'd be talking and thinking and working about an appeal bond and how to keep him on the street during his appeal of right, which he would have a right to in this situation.
Hey, Kurt, this is unprecedented. We have a very popular former president who's running for re-election. And I don't think the country's ever seen a situation where a president's been facing, 2 federal and 2 state indictments, and he still has other cases that have to be adjudicated. What happens with the former president and his run for office?
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because, you know, he hasn't really been impeached, right? In the Constitution, I'm pulling up Article 2 of the Constitution right now. It says, you know, high crimes and misdemeanors, which interestingly, it doesn't actually say felonies. And so, you know, I'm not really sure if you know, he would be eligible. You know, there were questions as to whether or not eligibility to run. Again, because he's not president, but Section 4 of Article 2, let me read this correctly. Vice President, President, and all civil offices shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. But the important part of that is that he wasn't in office when this incident occurred, and he's not in office right now.
And as I'm just reading some of the updates that are coming in, some of the coverage says he is the first American president to become a felon. Ramifications, Kurt, for all of this on our nation.
Yeah, well, I mean, ultimately, we need to wait and see when the conviction is finalized. The jury reading the verdict, at least in Maryland, under Maryland law and under federal law, is not the sort of the final say. His lawyers will have an opportunity to file a motion for new trial based on legal, procedural, and factual grounds. They'll have a right to an initial appeal of the jury's decision before any like in Maryland, for example, your conviction is not final until your first appeal of right is exhausted. And so, while we have some closure and while this may impact the election, there's not still that finality that I think the country would like to see as a result of this case.
Kurt, you mentioned something in the very beginning in talk with Mary and I, and that is that people are being asked, and we know there's an appeals process to move forward to, obviously, in this case. People are going to be asked to respect the rule of law. One of the arguments that many have made in the case of Donald Trump is this is a former president who did not respect the rule of law and didn't respect the electoral process that was being conducted in Congress and egged on supporters to go to the Capitol and do something about the election results. How do you reconcile those two things?
Well, I think the voters will have to reconcile that for themselves at the voter box. I mean, what I think and how I vote certainly only matters for me, and hopefully people will make their feelings felt, in November or in their primaries moving forward. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly troubling to have a president, sort of flaunt the rule of law when, we do, for all of our differences in the 200 plus years that our country's been in existence, whether the presidents have liked it or not, ultimately every single one has bowed to the rule of law.
And I'm just reading more that's coming out of the courtroom. The judge tells jurors they can talk about the case if they would like, but they do not have to. He said the choice is theirs, but they are no longer barred from talking about the case. He has asked to meet with them to talk about their work and not the facts of the case. It's really interesting. Some of the reporting out of the courtroom say former President Trump has not really reacted. He is looking at the jurors. Trump heard 34 times in court today the word guilty as each of the counts were read. The judge thanks the jury. He will soon dismiss them. We know that Trump has tried to discredit the judge in the case. He will probably try to do that for some of the jurors as well. Do you think, Kurt, in some of the cases that you have dealt with, do jurors tend to speak out? Do you think they will in this case?
That really depends a lot on the individual juror. I think in some circumstances, in high-profile cases, we've seen historically jurors are willing to talk out about their experience of being on a jury. I can certainly also imagine some of the jurors want to crawl back, go home, spend some time with their family, and stay out of the limelight, as is their right. They've certainly done their citizenry duty, and I cannot imagine the world of pressure that they were under. It would be a juror experience unlike any juror experience in American history, and certainly they should be commended for sticking to it and whether you agree with the results or not, those folks were under a huge amount of pressure to come to a particular result. And obviously they did that. And certainly I hope people respect their privacy if they elect to remain private.
All right, Kurt, we're going to ask that you just kind of hang on with us right now.
Sure.
We're going to show our viewers and show you, Kurt, a live look. This is outside of the courthouse. We also have a live look of the street where New York City police have assembled, just trying to make sure they maintain order. That's a view of it right now. Again, Donald Trump, former president, running for re-election, found guilty on all 34 counts of falsifying business records. This in relationship to a payment to adult film star Stormy Daniels and his fixer, Michael Cohen. We'll be back in a moment with more. And this just in, a New York jury finds former President Donald Trump guilty of 34 felony charges of falsifying business records related to hush money payments before the 2016 election. We'll keep monitoring the situation and bring you the very latest as we learn more. All right, Donald Trump is speaking after being found guilty of 34 felony charges. Let's listen in.
November 5th by the people, and they know what happened here, and everybody knows what happened here. You have a sore respect, DA, and the whole thing. We didn't do a thing wrong. I'm a very innocent man, and it's okay. I'm fighting for our country. I'm fighting for our Constitution. Our whole country is being rigged right now. This was done by the Biden administration in order to wound or hurt an opponent, a political opponent. And I think it's just a disgrace. And we'll keep fighting. We'll fight till the end and we'll win, because our country's gone to hell. We don't have the same country anymore. We have a divided mess. We're a nation in decline, serious decline. Millions and millions of people pouring into our country right now, from prisons and from mental institutions, terrorists, and they're taking over our country. We have a country that's in big trouble, but this was a rigged decision right from day one, with a conflicted judge who should have never been allowed to try this case, never. And we will fight for our Constitution. This is long from over. Thank you very much.
Why should voters vote for a convicted felon?
All right, a statement from former President Trump after being found guilty of 34 counts in falsifying business records in a case stemming from a payment that silenced a porn star. Stay with us. We will be right back.
As we've been reporting, a New York jury has found Donald Trump guilty of 34 felony charges of falsifying business records related to hush money payments before the 2016 election. We are monitoring what's happening. Trump spoke just a moment ago outside of the court, proclaiming, "I'm an innocent man." Those were his words, and lashing out.
Of course, reaction coming in from around the world, and right here in Maryland. Let's go to Mackenzie Frost at the Smart Board with more reaction from X and other sources. Mackenzie.
Yeah, Mary Kai, as you can imagine, the reaction is starting to pour in. Let's take a look. We're getting some reaction here from some Congress members. Let's take a look at this statement from Speaker Mike Johnson. He issued a statement following this verdict, saying today is a shameful day in American history. Democrats cheered as they convicted the leader of the opposing party on ridiculous charges predicated on the testimony of a disbarred convicted felon, going on to say that this was politically motivated. Also remind our viewers at home that this was a conviction coming from a jury of his peers, of Donald Trump's peers. Let's take a look at another statement here from Congressman Eric Swalwell, a Democrat from California, saying Donald Trump is a convicted felon. This verdict is not a win for any single person. It's a win for an idea, the idea that we all follow the same rules. The rule of law won today. As you can imagine, more frustration and disappointing statements coming in from Republican members of Congress. Take a look at it. One more statement here from Congressman Jim Jordan, saying the verdict is a travesty of justice. The Manhattan Kangaroo Court shows what happens when our justice system is weaponized by partisan prosecutors in front of a biased judge with an unfair process designed to keep President Trump off the campaign trail and avoid, going on to say, talking more about this. We do want to show one more reaction here from Donald Trump Jr., saying guilty on all counts. The Democrats have succeeded in their years-long attempt to turn America into a third world expletive. Let's get out of that one real quick. Don't need to show some language that is not appropriate for television. But Mary and Kai, you can see here that the reaction from members of Congress continue to pour in. Obviously, this verdict just coming in, so we expect to get more reaction from people as they see the news and take to social media. We'll see if we can find some more reaction and bring it to you later in the show.
Mackenzie, you did a great job. It's live TV. It's not easy to navigate.
Exactly. And that happens, as we know, on social media.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Kurt Nachman joining us again. Kurt, I really want to ask you about the possibility of an appeal here, because you know that's going to happen right away. What are the chances with a case that involves 34 counts?
Well, the question really is how clean was the trial? Was the defendant given an opportunity to have a fair trial? And if there were any sort of procedural evidentiary issues that the judge made pretrial rulings on, what are the odds of those being sort of upheld or overturned by an appellate court? Really, appellate courts are looking at the overall fundamental fairness of the process, and they're going to examine the transcript. They're going to make they're going to look at the rulings that the judge made at the time of the trial, and they're going to make determinations as to whether or not those rulings were fair. Obviously, I'm not in the courtroom, so I don't know the ins and outs of sort of what hearsay rules and jury instructions and voir dire questions were asked. And those are kind of the three critical areas that typically follow on a case like this. It's a long trial. There may be some evidence that wasn't admitted properly or shouldn't have been admitted that the defense objected to and the judge let in. And those are the kind of things that they're going to key in on. And the defense has undoubtedly already spent hours keying in on particularized issues of evidentiary rulings, pretrial jury instructions, as well as the jury instructions that were done at the conclusion of the case. And those are the kinds of things that they're going to raise on appeal, identifying whether or not the president received, fundamentally speaking, a fair process and a fair trial.
Kurt, you are an officer of the court, and you're fairly studious on these subjects. As much as you observe the Trump trial, are you able to take away any particular evidence that you thought may have been compelling to the jury?
Certainly, the evidence that was most compelling in this case is obviously the business records, right? The copies of the checks, the copies of the bank statements that were admitted and produced. Those are generally very irrefutable pieces of documentary evidence that go before a jury. It's very black and white. It's independent. And then you're also going to have, obviously, the live witness testimony. And so there will be lots and lots of questions in terms of Michael Cohen's testimony, Stormy Daniels' testimony, and how that was admitted and what sort of hearsay or hearsay exceptions came in through those witnesses and whether or not that was appropriate.
We know President Trump, former President Trump, spoke out just minutes ago. He said, "We will fight for our Constitution. This is long from over." Just your reaction to some of his comments. He spoke only for about 3 minutes.
I would just say that in my practice, I generally advise my clients not to talk to media. But clearly, in recent history, as well as in our own local political arena, it's worked out well for individuals who have spoken up, asserting their innocence. So we'll have to wait and see kind of what happens with President Trump.
All right, Kurt Nachman with Ian Lawyers giving us some analysis there. Kurt, we're going to ask you to hang on, and we're going to continue to move on, but please don't go anywhere.
Thanks.
All right, we are now joined by national correspondent Atra El-Nashar. Atra, give us the latest on what's happening outside the courthouse today with this verdict.
Yeah, good evening. It took the 12-person jury roughly 11 hours, over just a day and a half, to find former President Trump guilty on all 34 felony counts. The verdict's really coming down quicker than many experts anticipated, given the complexity of this case. Now, the sentencing, what happens next, that will occur at 10 a.m. on July 11th. That's just before the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. However, Trump's legal team has already said they will appeal the decision. I know you're just talking to an expert about that. That's certainly expected to delay things, or whatever the sentencing would be, whatever the punishment would be, I should say, potentially until after the election. Again, this is all very fluid. Now, Trump did already come out and address reporters outside of the courtroom, repeating claims that he says the case was rigged. However, earlier today, one of his attorneys was on CNN complimenting the jury, saying they were working very hard and they were being very thorough with all the questions and clarifications they were coming out with and asking. We have just in the last couple of minutes heard from the Biden campaign. I want to read you an excerpt of something they put out. They said, quote, "In New York today, we saw that no one is above the law. Donald Trump has always mistakenly believed he would never face consequences for breaking the law for his own personal gain." The campaign goes on to make its argument for why Trump should not be elected. It's also possible we hear directly from the president. He's in Delaware at this moment with the First Lady, but we'll be keeping an eye on any official announcements from the White House press office to see if he does address this matter as well, either as a president, but he may also address it as a candidate.
All right, Atra El-Nashar reporting live for us from D.C. Thank you. And just moments ago, Donald Trump addressing the media while leaving the courtroom. We're going to replay this for you again. Trump saying that the trial was rigged, politically motivated, and a disgrace.
And they know what happened here, and everybody knows what happened here. You have a sore respect, DA, and the whole thing. We didn't do a thing wrong. I'm a very innocent man. And it's okay. I'm fighting for our country. I'm fighting for our Constitution. Our whole country is being rigged right now. This was done by the Biden administration in order to wound or hurt an opponent, a political opponent. And I think it's just a disgrace. And we'll keep fighting. We'll fight till the end and we'll win, because our country's gone to hell. We don't have the same country anymore. We have a divided mess. We're a nation in decline, serious decline. Millions and millions of people pouring into our country right now from prisons and from mental institutions, terrorists, and they're taking over our country. We have a country that's in big trouble. But this was a rigged decision right from day one, with a conflicted judge who should have never been allowed to try this case, never. And we will fight for our Constitution. This is long from over. Thank you very much.
I'm Mary Bubala. Thank you for watching. Here's another video for you to watch. Also take some time to subscribe to our YouTube channel.